Welcome to Strain on the Game, the podcast that reveals what it really takes to keep elite footballers performing at the highest level. I'm Stephen Warnock, former Premier League player, joined by physical performance expert Adrian Lamb. From training ground truths to the financial impact of fitness, we discuss the often overlooked challenges behind the beautiful game. Next week, the Champions League returns with the quarter-finals, and the Premier League will be represented by two teams as Liverpool take on Paris Saint-Germain and Arsenal play Sporting Lisbon. This will be the fourth consecutive year that at least two English sides have reached the last 8. It sounds pretty good until we consider that there were 6 Premier League clubs in the last 16, and 4 of them have just been eliminated. Current World Club champions Chelsea, tongue twister, the Champions League winners from 3 years ago, Manchester City, Newcastle and Tottenham all crashed out with a combined score of 28-11, which has got us on the Strain on the Game asking, what happened? Welcome to Strain on the Game. Right, Lammy, how's your week been? Before we get into it, what have you been up to? Because I believe you've been at a convention.
Yeah, it was a performance summit down in San Diego. Which was hosted by the National Strength and Conditioning Association. So the theme was overhead sports, so volleyball and tennis, and rotational sport. So a lot of presentations from baseball. With San Diego Padres were heavily represented because it was at their Performance Institute. Arizona Diamondbacks, Texas Rangers. So really interesting. I went to look at the rotational thing primarily because football is a rotational sport. It's played in rotation. It was actually a really interesting thing that Arsene Wenger did at one of his FIFA conferences, where he was talking about the importance of rotation to young players and how the better performing young players were the ones who could rotate the best, so play on the half turn and receiving skills and passing skills and vision.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, really interesting. Also went with one eye looking at golf performance as well, looking at improving golf. Because there's a lot
improving your golf game, or just seeing what's going on?
Yeah, I've improved. The rotation of my backswing has increased by 0.00028 millimeters. It's not a half swing, it's not a third swing, it's like a chop. But yeah, so that's not really benefiting me much. But yeah, looking from ground reaction forces, sequencing, moving force up through the kinetic chain and through the core, and then how to increase club head speed, and then the deceleration forces associated with controlling the moment of impact and making sure you get a good contact, which is a nice way of us bringing into, I believe, talking about golf, you have fulfilled in the last few weeks a lifetime ambition, haven't you? You've got a hole in one. You've had a hole in one. Come on, tell us about it.
Oh, honestly, I can't stop thinking about it. Do you know when you hit a shot and you just think, God, this is so good? I was playing in a competition at my course, and we were on the 7th hole, and a little bit of wind down, but I've hit a pitching wedge into it because of the wind. It was like 150, and it just never left the flag. And I remember thinking as it was going, I was thinking, this is going to be close. And it literally took one hop and jumped in, and I was delighted. Honestly, brilliant. I was like, that'll do me. I was playing all right. I was up and down, but I was like, I don't care how I play for the rest of the round now. I'm absolutely made up. But the thing was, the next hole, I think I had a birdie putt as well, because everyone always says, the next hole's the hardest hole because your heart rate and your adrenaline's pumping.
Yeah.
And I had a birdie putt, ended up getting a par, and I thought, well, that's all right. It's not too bad a sign. Yeah, that was it. After that, the adrenaline really kicked in. I was over clubbing everything. It was a nightmare, but yeah, walked off with kept the ball, hole in one, delighted.
How much did it cost you in the clubhouse afterwards?
Well, to be honest, we're quite lucky at our club. So in the past, it's been expensive, and especially on a club day. I walked in ready to pay whatever it is. I've only been a member at my course coming up to 2 years now. Right. But they put bottles of whiskey on the bar for everyone.
Wow, what a
So
gesture
not
that
like
is.
one each, but a bottle with shot glasses, and everyone just helps themselves.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
I
so it's
know
a nice touch.
I know that my dad had hole-in-one insurance for a while. I don't know if you've
Yeah,
heard of
yeah.
that before.
Yeah,
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 everyone
yeah.
everyone gets it, don't they?
Yeah.
So,
Well,
brilliant. Well,
I don't need it. I've never come close. The windmill keeps getting in the way of my hole-in-one. Keep hitting the
oh,
clown.
yeah.
No. But well done, mate. Congratulations.
Thank you
Delighted
very
for you.
much. Thank
I
you.
know that we were doing an episode a few weeks ago, and our friend of the show, Dave Hancock, called halfway through, didn't he? And
Yeah, he
he
did.
just got a hole-in-one, and the look on your face, you were,
Oh,
you
I was
bastard.
fuming.
Ah,
Yeah. Well,
well done.
congratulations, Dave Hancock, as well.
Yeah, yeah, well done, Dave.
We know he
Brilliant.
listens, so that's good.
But anyway,
Right, let's get into it because there's an awful lot to get into.
yeah,
We're talking about the English clubs being eliminated and it being such a great start in the Champions League. You think where Spurs were in the Premier League, but comfortably qualified to get through to the knockout stages, and suddenly it's all gone tits up.
yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? So we had a little conversation about this, and it was an eyebrow raiser more than anything at first. It was like, oh, we should probably have done a bit better than that with 6 and then 4 going out. And then we started drilling down into it a little bit and looking a bit closer, didn't we, at potential reasons behind it.
Yeah.
And some interesting things have popped up, which we're going to talk about today. But, you know, I don't know if sometimes there's an arrogance about the Premier League or about us that having worked in the Premier League, that we think of the Premier League as being the best league in the world, the best players want to come and play in the Premier
Yeah.
League, you know, the richest club. It is by far and away the most watched league in the world. So surely that should translate into dominating in Europe. And I think by and large, over the last 10 years, Premier League clubs have done really, really well. You know, in the last 10
Yeah.
years, there's been 7 Premier League teams in finals, you know, and we've had 2 all Premier League finals, haven't we? We've had
Yep.
Liverpool, Spurs, Chelsea and Man City, which kind of gets forgotten about a little bit because it was during COVID. And when
Yes.
when you compare that to other leagues, we've had 6 from Spain, 5 have been Real Madrid. So they're
Yeah.
just in a different stratosphere, aren't they? 3 from Italy, 2 from Germany, 2 from France. And then if you look at winners over the last 10 years, we've had 3 Champions League winners from England, from the Premier League. And you compare that again, 1 from Germany, 1 from France. Real Madrid, they've just banged
Dominated.
5 out, haven't they? So
Yeah.
they're the anomaly, aren't they? And you can extend that to the Europa League as well. You know, we've had, again, 7 English teams appearing in finals. Again, 2 all Premier League finals, which last year we had the Spurs Man United one, didn't we?
Yeah.
And you contrast that, 5 from Spain, 3 from Italy, 2 from Germany, 1 from France, 1 from the Netherlands. Forgot about Rangers getting to the final, so 1 from Scotland. You forget that
Incredible.
flies
Yeah.
under the radar a little bit, that one, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And again, we've had 3 winners from England, 1 from Germany, 1 from Italy, 5 from Spain, spread out a little bit more equally. Sevilla have always done well. So, and then you know, West Ham won the Europa Conference, and Chelsea won the Europa Conference. So there's a little bit of, well, are we looking too deep into this? What are we complaining about? But if our representatives now are Arsenal and Liverpool, aren't they? If they get knocked out in the semis or in the quarterfinals this year, that would then mean that there hasn't been a Premier League team reaching the Champions League final in 3 consecutive years since Manchester City won it. And that hasn't happened in over 10 years. There was a spell between 2011 when Chelsea won it on penalties and 2016 when there was no team, no English team, no Premier League team reaching the final.
Yeah.
But so it's not crisis point, but we had the conversation, didn't we? We thought, let's have a look at this. Let's see, could this be an inflection point? And it was more, as you said, the way that the Premier League teams started this Champions League campaign,
Yeah.
and the manner in which they exited it, we thought, are these starting to burn out? And what's actually happening here, isn't there?
Can I ask you a question then? So, start of the season, a little bit different because effectively, I mean, it might have been different when you were at Newcastle and they were in the Champions League when you were there.
Yeah, I mean, I was at the
So,
academy, so I wasn't
yeah,
working
so you weren't being involved as much. But
Yeah,
at the start of the season, if I'm in an environment where we're going for the Champions League and the Premier League, we're talking predominantly the teams are Liverpool, Manchester City, and Arsenal, who are probably going after both. They're the three that we'd look at.
yeah,
At what point would someone say, "Well, let's not put a strong team out in the Carabao Cup, and let's not put a strong team out in the FA Cup because that's an opportunity to rest our players." And we concentrate solely on making sure that those players are rested for those games. But then there is the other side of it where there's a pressure from the fans who pay money that they
yeah.
want to see their best players. But
Yeah,
are
I
those
mean,
conversations had behind the scenes as to we've got to keep our players as fresh as we can for if you're trying to stay within the Premier League or trying
yeah,
to run for the Premier League?
I think those conversations, I think, do happen. I think they
Mm,
probably happen more um, at the managerial level, and that's why the
yeah,
managers get paid the big bucks, and the coaching staff. That's the manager's decision. But increasingly, as we've spoken about in previous podcasts, managers are now increasingly having to justify their decisions to the board
yeah,
and to sporting directors, and sporting directors are becoming increasingly apparent within the Premier League and within the English game. They've been on the
yeah.
continent for a while, so managers are becoming less managers and more head coaches.
Mm,
So then there is that. Certainly, when in times, I think back to our time at Blackburn again, and that year that when Sam and myself and various other staff members first came in, and we were struggling for Premier League survival. Premier League survival was the goal,
yeah,
paramount, end of story. And so you don't you don't go into a game not wanting to win it, but there was um,
it makes life
FA
easier.
Cup ties. FA Cup ties third round in January, where one or two players who probably wouldn't be first choice players if we were playing a Premier League game would be starting.
Yeah,
And you're not going to go out, but you're less concerned about winning the FA Cup when you're talking about Premier League survival because it's much, much more important.
yeah,
And I'm somebody who loves the FA Cup. I grew up with the FA Cup being all day Saturday. The cameras were following the bus to the stadium, club suits, all of that, grandstand on a side.
yeah,
I love the FA Cup, and I do mourn the fact that it's become diminished a little bit. But we've got to face reality, and we've got to live in the real world. The real world is driven largely by money.
yeah.
Premier League survival is money.
Mm.
Champions League is money. Qualification. It was
Huge riches.
you were in and around that Europa League final last year. What really struck me in the conversation around the media wasn't that these were going to win a European competition,
It was
but
getting
one
in
of
the
these
Champions
teams was
League.
going to qualify for the Champions League, dominated the conversation.
Yeah,
And that's a litmus test. That's an indicator of where we are. So that's
yeah.
reality. That's just the reality of the situation. Yes, you would prioritize that, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, the FA Cup for us was huge growing up, but I think European players now, and probably a lot of English players, they just want to play Champions League football because they know that's against the elite players and against the elite teams, and that's what they're looking to do, and it's fully understandable. Um, yeah, so I think from club's point of view, I think there is an element where the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup will have to go on the back burner a little bit.
Yeah.
However, I've been to a couple of FA Cup games this season working on them. I was at Mansfield versus Arsenal. Mikel Arteta had to bring on a lot of players to get through that game. and
Yeah.
had a lot of first-team players playing in that game. And I was really surprised, thinking, I can't believe he's not brought the kids here.
Yeah.
But they wanted, and this is, again, maybe a little bit naive, because Liverpool tried it a few years ago. They were thinking, we'll go for the quadruple. So difficult.
Yeah.
So tough to try and achieve anything like that. But obviously confidence is high and you don't feel tired at the time. But then I watched Liverpool in their games in the FA Cup, and he's putting out a first 11.
Yeah.
Pretty much his first team 11, because form's dipped and he's thinking, I need a result against Wolves. I can't be playing a second string 11, because if we get beat here, they got beat there a few days before in the Premier League, can't have back-to-back losses against the bottom team, Wolves. So suddenly his mindset changes and you're thinking, yeah, but what's the bigger picture? The bigger picture is getting a place in the Premier League to get in the Champions League.
Yeah.
In them top places, but also the Champions League, you need to be fresh. So we'll get onto that now and talk about.
It would be interesting if we could sit all of the managers down and say, what would you rather have? An FA Cup win, or an FA Cup final appearance, or finish in the top four? And that would interest me to see, where people's thoughts.
Well, very quickly, I do know, speaking to people, that Unai Emery is desperate to win the FA Cup.
Right.
So last year they thought that they had a really good chance of winning the FA Cup, but they were also in the Champions League.
Yeah.
And they were also pushing for top four places to get in the Champions League places. And you're thinking, what's his priority? Well, he fielded a really strong team in the FA Cup in pretty much every round. And you're thinking, so it means a lot to him, because he's thinking, well, when I retire, I want to be able to say I've won the FA Cup in England. I've won.
Absolutely.
It's about trophies. But then you've got the board saying, no. If you want to buy players, you need money. The Champions League brings the money, and then you can buy the players. You can strengthen the team. It's like such a vicious cycle.
Well, if you're talking about recruitment and bringing players to your club,
what brings them in?
What brings them in? Or if you're going to sit down and say, we could win the FA Cup next year, or we've qualified for the Champions League. There's, anyway, this level of competition is something that we're going to talk about towards the end of this episode, because it's definitely a driving factor. Yeah. But we looked, didn't we? We looked at, like I said, we drilled down into this. It was interesting to us that 4 teams got knocked out when they'd started so well in the earlier rounds of the Champions League. Yeah. And it raised an eyebrow, and we started looking a little bit, and then we found the same old story that we've been talking about from episode 1, and the reason why we're called Strain on the Game.
Yeah.
Number of games, the amount of football that players are playing, individual players, the lack of opportunities for players to get rest in season, which comes back to this competitiveness of the Premier League that we've just spoken about, and all the cup competitions. And so a starting point was we looked at transfer market, and we looked at the number of games that teams are playing. This stat surprised me. This really took me by surprise. If you'd asked me before, you could have given me 10 guesses and wouldn't got it. The Newcastle are the club that have played more games than any other team in Europe this season.
Incredible, isn't it?
We've really only looked at the big 5 leagues is what we're talking about, the most competitive. So Premier League, Ligue 1, Serie A, La Liga, Bundesliga. So we're really only sort of and the Turkish league will come into it a little bit because of Galatasaray that we're going to speak about. But across, looking at the teams who've played the most this season, the top 10, the top 6 are all from the Premier League.
Yeah.
They're all from the Premier League. Now, when we look at, I was interested in the Newcastle versus Barcelona tie, because I've got an affiliation with Newcastle. It's one of my former clubs, and I've still got friends in and around Newcastle who are supporters, and that was at that time that was Newcastle's 50th game of the season, which surprised me. It was Barcelona's 45th, so it's kind of 10% more, isn't it?
It's crazy because it doesn't sound that much, but when you actually factor in minutes into that, then it changes everything, doesn't it?
And players that are playing those minutes within the context of those games, how how we spread the load among different players. It's a really interesting one. And then you think, well, how did Newcastle get to 50 games? They had that deep run, didn't they, in the League Cup, the Carabao Cup. But Barcelona had a run in the Copa del Rey, and they had the Super Cup to play, and all of these things. So that surprised me. So if we look at now the teams that have played the most in Europe, as we stand today, Newcastle have played 51 games. So they're number one in Europe, most games played. Arsenal have played 50. Chelsea and City have both played 49. Crystal Palace are in there on 47 with Liverpool. And then Atletico Madrid have also played 47. But when we look at the other significant Champions League teams that are still in the competition, Barcelona have now played 46. Real Madrid have played 45. Again, that surprises me a little bit. Yeah. So Sporting have played 44. They're going to be playing Arsenal next. So Arsenal have played 6 games more than Sporting Lisbon. And then PSG, and we're going to talk a lot about PSG and the differences between the Premier League and Ligue 1. Apologise for my French accent in advance. They played 43 games, PSG. You know, they're going to be playing against Liverpool, who played 47. And there's some interesting things in and around that PSG-Liverpool game in terms of scheduling, which we're going to talk about. Bayern Munich have played 42 games. You know, it's... You know,
and interestingly, I've been keeping an eye on Bayern a little bit because I cover the Champions League show with the BBC. And Harry Kane's being rested.
Yeah.
They're looking after him because they're thinking later on down the line, we know we've got enough to beat teams. They comfortably battered Atalanta, so they could afford to stick him on the bench.
Yeah.
It's absolutely frightening, but they're doing it in the league and in the cups as well. It's just like, just take him out as and when we need to, because we've got that much quality and depth that we know we can do that within our leagues.
Yeah, and this will come back round to that competitive nature of the leagues that you've just sort of spoken about there, in terms of, Arsenal are playing a cup competition, but they need to win and they bring their best players on. Bayern, the level of competition probably isn't there, which we're going to talk about. But that's a driver. That's a driver of rotation. So then we looked at, didn't we? So we said, okay, fine. These clubs are playing more games in the Premier League than in other European leagues with Champions League teams. But you could spread the load throughout the squad. You know, just because they're playing more games doesn't necessarily that's affecting the players directly. You know, you can. So that means we have to look at player load metrics, and we have to look at some metric that's going to say how much load are players playing under. And a good way of looking at how clubs are distributing load throughout the squad is to look at how many minutes individual players are playing. And at this stage of the season, the benchmark is 2,500 minutes. So just as at this stage of the season, different stages of the season, we have different benchmarks. The high water line, if you like, is 2,500 minutes.
Yeah.
When we look at this metric, again, Premier League clubs have got a significant number of players who've played over 2,500 minutes compared to other European teams who are in the Champions League. So in other words, Premier League teams and players within Premier League teams are being exposed to more match load.
Yeah.
Right. And we can decide whether or not that matters later on and what effect that might be happening. But the fact is, Newcastle, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester City, they all have at least 8 players, all of whom have acquired more than 2,500 minutes of football this season. And that equates to about a quarter of their squad. So they're not, and injuries can come into this because players are not being able to be selected. So if we've got a high injury burden, then these players are going to have to pick up the slack and play more minutes. But, it's more than any other team from any other league. So if we look at the league table, top 10, number of players playing more than 2,500 minutes in Europe this season. Number 1, Liverpool. They have 11 players in their squad who are above that benchmark.
Wow.
Newcastle, they've got 9. Arsenal have got 9. 31 players used, 29% of the squad. Chelsea are 4th on 8. Manchester City are 5th. They've also got 8, so level. Galatasaray, who we don't really talk about much because they're not in the Big 5 league, but they've got 8 players. And then now we're into the non-Premier League teams. So 7th is Atletico Madrid. They've got 7 players in their squad who've had a match burden above 2,500 minutes.
Which is 10% less than Liverpool, who are first.
Yeah, exactly. And then when we get down into the games that we're talking, Paris Saint-Germain have had 3. Right, they've got 3 players in their squad. 11% of the squad they've used 28 players. Have acquired above 2,500 minutes. Liverpool have got 11. There's a contrast because the Liverpool are playing Paris in the next round.
Yeah.
Paris Saint-Germain have had the capacity to spread the load more evenly or share it more evenly or spread it better throughout their squad than Liverpool have for lots of different reasons. What does that mean? Does that mean Liverpool's players will be coming in more fatigued or better prepared? That's...
Yeah, I get that, but it's got to be fatigue, Lammy. Has to be. Because the one thing that we always talk about, and one things that we mention on this is, like, and it's always mentioned at football clubs, is the 1%. Can you get the 1% over another team? Well, Paris Saint-Germain there have got 23% over Liverpool.
Yeah.
Not 1%, 23%.
Yeah.
And their squad's incredible.
Yeah.
So that's the other side that I look at and go, okay, so from a recruitment aspect, did Liverpool balls it up in the summer by going out and spending 110 million on Wirtz and 130, 140, whatever it was on Isak?
Yeah.
When would you have been better buying four or 5 players at, say, 50 million each and having really good players that then you have squad depth that you can rotate?
It's a really, really interesting question, and I've had some experience of that working in Major League Soccer, which is a salary capped league.
Yeah.
And so the way that you construct your squad is really, really interesting because everybody's on a level playing field in terms of salaries that they can play. There are designated players, so-called designated players, who sit outside of that salary cap. But you've got a salary cap. So, this was in my time with Ryan Nelson, who we had on a previous podcast. Do you go for 4 or 5 really, really, really top players and pay them the money that they would get?
Yeah.
Or do you spread it a little bit more evenly and get 8 or 9 above average players? Because if you're getting so many really good players and you've got to pay them the money, then you've got a bigger difference in the skill content and the quality of your squad. You've got you've got a small amount of really, really top players and a lot of below average players. So it's an interesting challenge for that. There was one. I spent some time with Sydney Swans, who are Aussie Rules team.
Yeah,
and they're in a salary capped league. And because Sydney is significantly more expensive as a city to live in, they did an interesting thing. They cut, I think it was 2 players off their playing roster, off their squad, in order that they could pay players more against the cap to attract them to live in Sydney so they could get better players. And what they did was they invested in an incredible sports science and sports medicine department because obviously they've got money, but they can't spend it on players. So they're going to invest it in staff to keep their best players healthy. What do we always say on this podcast? The most successful teams are the teams that keep their best performers available for the longest time. So injury mitigation and player management there's an interesting thing actually coming out of this summit that I was at yesterday, where one of the San Diego Padres practitioners was talking about injury mitigation, and their view was injuries are down to mismanagement of players. We've got something wrong somewhere. We measure fatigue, we measure response, and then how we manage players in and around that. So yeah, in terms of all of these Premier League, Champions League teams, how are they managing their players? Is a decision. It's a decision from the sports science staff, the coaching staff, ultimately the manager, as to what are we going to do with these players on this particular day? Are we going to play them? Are we going to rest them? Can we afford to rotate them? So many factors that go into it.
Yeah.
So many different factors that go into it. But then that informs your recruitment as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, loads of things. So that,
yeah.
and then just to sort of underline that point about Premier League players playing more minutes than anyone else, looking at individual players now, so not just teams and the number of players above 2,500 minutes, but actual minutes played by players. The top 10 outfield players with the most minutes played this season in the last 16 of the Champions League, the top of the 12 out of the top 20 from the Premier League.
Okay.
So of the top 20, 12 are Premier League players. All of the top 5 with the most minutes played this season are Premier League teams. So you might have to help me out with a couple of pronunciations here, but Thiaw.
Alex Thiaw.
Yeah.
From Newcastle.
975 minutes. Now, anecdotally, because I do still have some friends who are supporters of Newcastle, not people who work in the club, but, diehard fans. And I got a couple of text messages after the Sunderland game. Their view is that he started the season really, really well and he's dropped off.
Yeah, I'd agree.
And I can't say that. That's anecdotal, but he looks like, in their words, he looks like a player who needs a rest.
Yeah.
And coming into the league, it's a lot. Van Dijk is coming second, 3,951 minutes. Szoboszlai, there's 2 Liverpool players with heavy load.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw the Hungarian coach had a little bit of a go at Arne Slot. They were having a little go back and forth in press conferences about how he was going to be managed in the internationals.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting thing.
Another problem.
Well, and we've done that on a previous podcast, haven't we, about the internationals and how that affects the Premier League. But I keep looking at Arsenal players and injuries, and a couple of them have dropped out of the squad. Are they injured? Are they not injured? Yeah, interesting sort of things. Games that are being played in international breaks by club managers are really interesting,
especially at this time of the season as well.
Well,
this is the worst one.
Yeah, this is the one where it's, outside of the World Cup qualifiers that we've just had, the sort of friendly games, important games for players to get into the World Cup squad, right?
Yeah.
Important players for important games for head coaches of national teams to take a last little look at the players that they've got, and then, but nightmare for club managers. Please don't get injured. Please don't get injured. Please don't get injured.
But also for the players who are going for, like Arsenal players who are going after a Premier League, thinking, I want to be in that running.
Yeah.
And they almost forget about the World Cup because they go, well, if we win the league, I'll be in the World Cup squad because I'll have played well. So that's the hard thing for them.
And we take one game at a time, right? The World Cup is far enough away for us not to really think about it. This next game is coming up. Fernandes 4th at Chelsea, Tonali. You get to 6th where you get Alex Garcia from Leverkusen, who's 3,500 minutes. Zubimendi, Arsenal. So, looking again, there's the PSG player, Zaire Emery. He comes in 9th, 3,400 minutes. So there's one PSG player in the top 10 and 2 Liverpool players. So, yeah. The outcome of that is Premier League players are playing more games, more minutes, and within that, what is the intensity of the Premier League? To your point, the intensity they're playing more minutes, and within those minutes, the
Yeah.
physicality of the Premier League. You're probably in a better position to tell me because you see a broader range of games. But in terms of European football, I can tell you from a statistical point of view and from a metrics and a GPS point of view. But in terms of the emotion and the actual games, you would have a better idea than me in terms of what the different leagues are like.
Well, I mean, from what I watch and from what I see, I'd say the load in the Premier League is a lot more, the physicality of it. I think, how often do we talk about, especially in the media, fans, or give me a year to get up to speed in the
Yeah.
Premier League. So
Yeah.
even the players say it's physically stronger, it's faster, it's more ferocious. I mean, the tackles are harder, the way that the game's played, there's more physicality in the games. So that is to the naked eye, if you like. And then obviously you've got the stats to back that up as well. So I think the Premier League over the course of the season is more difficult and strenuous to play in. And also as well, there's more pressure in it because of more eyes on it. And the wealth within the Premier League as well.
That
So
creates pressure. Yeah. You know,
absolutely.
people can say it doesn't, but it absolutely does. So
Yeah.
so then the next thing, so more load. If you've got more load, you need more recovery to get over that load, right? So then we looked at opportunities to recover in season, and there was two things that came out of it, which was opportunities for squad rotation to rest your players when you've got games and perhaps select other players, but then the schedule itself. And what was I looked at again, Transfer Market was a resource here, transfermarket.com. Players at Premier League clubs have got much less opportunities to rest in the season than other Champions League teams in European leagues, partly because of the schedule and partly because the Premier League is much more competitive than other leagues.
Yeah.
So opportunities are not there. So we're just in an international break, or coming to the end. We're recording this on the Sunday, so we'll still be in that international break phase when this podcast goes out. So we've got a nice sort of bookend of time between the last international break in October and the one that we're having now in March. Since the last international break in October, the longest gap that Newcastle had between games was 6 days. Liverpool and Chelsea, their longest gap was 9 days. Arsenal and Man City was 8 days. Compare that to continental teams, European teams. Barcelona, Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, PSG, they all had gaps of between 13 and 15 days built into the competitive schedule. So there's more opportunities.
That's incredible, isn't it?
To rest. And this then brings us to a really interesting fact, which is, what can the football authorities do to protect clubs a little bit more, protect players who are in the Champions League? Let's have a look about what League One are doing compared to the Premier League. So it would appear that League One are protecting or giving PSG a better opportunity to rest and recover in their Champions League schedule than probably any other league, and because this is something that you highlighted to me in a conversation we had this week. PSG have had their game against Lens, which was scheduled to take place between the two Liverpool games. They've had that rearranged to the 13th of May in order to give them more recovery time. And this isn't a one-off thing. This is something they've done before, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the interesting thing is from Ligue 1's point of view is, yes, they're helping out one of their teams, but if their team goes on to promote it, it makes their league look better. That it looks like a strong league then. But they are protecting their team and they're making sure. I mean, the only argument I had with you about this is they're gonna back end their load at the end when it's arguably the hardest point of the season. So if they are to progress against Liverpool and then make it to the semi-final and final, semi-finals more so than anything, the final, they'll probably have, a 2-week break in between
Yeah,
or something around that. It's roughly that, isn't it?
yeah,
Maybe 10 days, which will protect them a little bit and help them to recover. But they are back-ending the load.
yeah,
However, they're thinking, well, if we can get to the semi-finals
yeah.
over 2 games, the players' adrenaline might just take them through as well.
Yeah, they are. You're dead right. They're kicking the can down the road. But if we look at this Liverpool PSG game, which is interesting, Liverpool play Man City in the FA Cup on April the 4th, right? Which is
Uh,
you would
uh, it's
a
their
much
own success that's caused a problem.
yeah, but it's a game they'll definitely want to win, so they'll be strong. They'll
Yeah,
be
they're not
strong
going to put a
because
weakened team out, are they?
no. They then play PSG.
And sorry to interrupt, City are out the Champions League, so they don't have
Yeah,
to worry about that midweek.
yeah, exactly. Which is unusual, isn't it, at this stage of the season?
Yeah.
For Man City, I would argue.
Mm.
They then play PSG on April the 8th, so 4 days later. They've then got Fulham on April the 11th, so that's 3 days after that, and they play PSG again on April the 14th. In comparison to that, the games for PSG, they play Toulouse on April the 3rd, so that game's been moved to a Friday night.
Yeah.
To give them more time before the first Liverpool game. That middle game has been moved to May now to give them all that time. And then they play Liverpool on the 8th and the 14th. So there's much more opportunity to recover, rest. And I'm interested in this from a player's perspective because I know what I think from a fitness coach's perspective. But if you're playing and you're playing well, what would you prefer to do? Would you prefer to have that gap and that rest in between? Or would you like to just keep going and keep going and keep going?
You want a gap.
You'd want the gap, right?
Of course you would, because you want to feel 100% going into a game. You don't want to feel 60, 70, 80% and feeling a little bit drained and, that game took a lot out of us the last game. Even though you are, like you say, probably riding the crest of a wave and you're feeling good about yourself, it's still mentally draining and tiring.
Yeah.
There's nothing better than recovering, having either time off or lighter time on the training ground to get your energy levels back. You're essentially plugging yourself back in and recharging your batteries, aren't you? Whereas it's almost having a faulty battery charger, isn't it? That only gets you to 70, 80%, and you think, oh, fucking hell, that's not going to last. Well, that's the same with the players as well. It doesn't matter how much food you get in you, how much recovery you get in you. It's still not the same as having a week's recovery.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I agree with you.
But even mentally, you're going into that going, I'm fully prepared for this game. I can throw everything at this.
Yeah.
Whereas you might think, I have to be careful in this game. I hope I feel okay going into it. Hope my legs are okay in the first 15, 20 minutes. Whereas after a week, you're like, I'm ready to go.
Yeah. And it's an interesting one, and I'm in complete agreement with you. It's an interesting one that it was a strategic decision that I read the statement from Ligue 1, the LFP. It was a strategic decision to enable France to retain its 5th place in the UEFA coefficient. Performance of clubs in European competitions determines how many qualification places a league receives for the Champions League in future seasons. France currently hold 4 Champions League spots. This is a broader conversation about, is the Premier League, because we've said we're now getting to a point where there's going to be a period of time where English clubs or Premier League clubs may not be in finals. Is there starting to generate a risk where the Premier League might lose one of the Champions League spots in the future? I don't know, but it's something to bear in mind. The other thing about this is what do Lens think, because they're going for the title as well.
It's bonkers, isn't it?
And they appealed the decision, and they were very much against it. And I also have that little bit of a thing of, fair enough, it was number 1 and number 2 in the French league, and that game has now been postponed. And there might be a little bit of this could be a kind of a a crescendo moment for them to win the league, and there'll be more eyes on it because that game is now going to. If it still is tight at the end of the season, then there's more marketing, commercial opportunities for that game because it's more of an event. So I wonder if that might have come into play a little bit as well.
But Lons will have been thinking, if we can get that game in the middle, then Paris Saint-Germain might rest a few players, depending on how the tie's gone. So there's so many little facets to it.
Exactly. So have they, in a way, devalued the league competition to prioritise the Champions League? I also think a little bit about other games where, let's say, let's look at it through the lens of the Premier League. If you are one of the teams who are in danger of relegation down the bottom, if you are, let's say, a West Ham, who else? Maybe a Leeds who were down there. And the same thing was to be applied in the Premier League where a game got postponed, or a Tottenham. Then all of a sudden you're creating a bit of a two-tier system where there might be a team down the bottom gets penalised for that or gets punished through no fault of their own because they have to play. Suddenly that game has to be played at a different time. And they might have lost a couple of players by then, important players. Or you play that game, the team that you're competing against for that Premier League place gets their game pushed back, and they might get a couple of players back. Yeah. So it's a very, very difficult balancing act, isn't it? It's a really
massive problem.
There's always going to be winners and losers of it. There's always going to be winners and losers in it, and that kind of brings us to our next bit about opportunities to rest players. Going back to this Champions League thing, opportunities to rest players in season. Premier League clubs have got less opportunities to rotate than other Champions League teams because of the fact that the league is much more competitive. It's more competitive than other European leagues. And to look at that, we only need a good way of looking at that is the gap between teams in Champions League qualifications, basically fourth place, and teams in the relegation zone. So the gap between fourth place, which at the moment is Aston Villa, and the top relegation, so third bottom, at the moment is 25 points. Actually, when the Champions League last 16 games were being played, it was 22 points. So that game's opened up. So it's the most compact in Europe. La Liga, it's 29 points. Bundesliga, it's 29 points. Ligue 1 is 30 points. Serie A, it's 30 points. In the Premier League, anyone can beat anyone at any given time. We've seen that time and time again. Teams have to compete in every single game, and they can't afford to save their legs against lower ranked opposition because you'll end up with egg on your face.
Absolutely,
you'll end up losing. So that's it. So just to sort of wrap this whole idea up, then, so cast our mind back to the conversation we had on recovery with Dr. Robin Thorpe, where he would say there would be certain players within your squad that you wouldn't want to pull them out. They'd just keep them going, as long as your testing was and your monitoring system was fit for purpose. Just because they're playing all these minutes, it doesn't really have an effect on their performance. They're capable of doing it. Other players are different. So we had a look, didn't we, what the outcome was, and there's two big effects. Physical outputs, but also technical, tactical outputs. The Premier League teams in the Champions League in the last 16 noticeably running less total distance than they were in the earlier rounds. And that completely correlates with what you were saying at the start of this podcast, which is the Premier League teams started so well and so strongly and looked magnificent, and that's just deteriorated. Newcastle were outrun by Barcelona over both legs of the tie, which you would be surprised by. And this comes from Opta. So we don't get the sprints, and the real important for me stats in the number of sprints, sprint distance, high speed running. We get the total distance, and I do risk being a little bit hypocritical here because I've said previously, total distance doesn't decide who wins and loses games, but this is an indicator of physical performance.
It's all we can go off at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. Man City had the lowest distance outputs in the Champions League in both games against Real Madrid. I know there was a player sent off, so that affects that. By contrast, in order to beat Galatasaray, Liverpool had to produce their highest total distance outputs in the Champions League to beat Galatasaray. And then the cost is the interesting thing. What comes next? What comes after that? If you look at all of those teams in the Premier League, their Premier League performance, the first game back after the Champions League, Everton pumped Chelsea 3-0. I mean, we could do a whole episode on Chelsea at the moment, I think.
Yeah, it's incredible.
There's all sorts going. Brighton beat Liverpool, and I know you were watching that game.
Yeah.
Liverpool were a shadow, weren't they, of themselves?
They just got overrun, absolutely battered, bullied, everything. They looked tired physically, mentally. Yeah. And then I saw
the first half of that game. I thought Brighton were terrific. Really
and then I was at the next game as well.
Tottenham Forest.
Oh.
Talk me through that one.
Oh, wow. Again, Tottenham dead on the feet. But we talk about pressure in the game. I was working with Martin Tyler, and we were in the lift, and got in the lift with some Spurs fans, and they were like, "Fancy us today to win this?" And me and Martin both said, "Can't see it." And they were like, "Why? You just beat Atletico at home." They're like, "Yeah, but that was your biggest game because there was no pressure to win it because you were already out of the tie, and today you've got to play under pressure in front of your fans in a must-win game against Nottingham Forest." And they couldn't deal with it. So they couldn't deal with that pressure. And that's what we talk about as well, being able to play under pressure and express yourself and be physically strong. So, mentally, physically, Tottenham were drained.
Yeah.
And then,
going back to your earlier point, what's the most important game for Tottenham in that period? Is it the second leg against Atletico Madrid, or is it the home game against Forest? And how do you manage the squad and the players accordingly if you're the manager?
Well, and as well, we must have to say, another managerial vacancy. Igor Tudor left today, left Spurs. So they are now after another manager, which is another one on the chopping board. So he lasted 44 days in charge of a Premier League team, winning one Premier League point, which was away at Anfield, and won one game, which was at home against Atletico Madrid, which was a game that Atletico didn't really need to bother playing. They probably played it at around about 50% and thought, well, we're going through anyway.
Yeah. Ange is available.
But there's many available. I'm not sure many had won it.
We'll do that. We'll do that conversation later. Who's going to go into Spurs? Newcastle, Sunderland, and then they got beat on that last goal. But they all lost. Arsenal, Man City is obviously that was the final, and we're going to talk about that a little bit in this just to wrap it up. I think this is a really important thing. I think this is starting to think of, are we now starting to get to an inflection point? Because, physical performance, we talk about that a lot, strain on the game, all of that, me being a fitness coach. But we talk about performance. Performance isn't just physical, the technical, tactical, physical, psychological, that integrated model of performance. So we have to look at technical markers as well.
Yeah.
As an indicator of overall performance, and a good start to indicate how well players are playing technically is the number of chances created from open play. And people can bounce these stats around and say, well, it's not real and all rest. But it's something measurable, and it can tell us a story, and it can paint a picture. And what we see quite starkly is that Premier League players are less creative than European players in the Champions League this season. There is one Premier League player in the top 10, right? Which is Wirtz for Liverpool, who we can have the conversation as to whether or not he's struggled to adapt to the Premier League or not, but he's flying in Europe. So in terms of that technical stat, but looking at the strong teams left in the competition, PSG and Real Madrid alone have got 3 players each in the top 10. So if we go down the top 10 really quickly, we've got Hauge, who plays for Bodo Glimt with 27. He's 27 in the Champions League. Fantastic. What a story that is. Wirtz is also with 27. Mbappe has created 25 chances from open play. And we can go down the list then. There's 3 from PSG. There's a number. Vinicius Jr. is at 10 with 19. Hakimi is 9 with 20. But the fact there's only one Premier League player in the top 10 is indicative of a lack of creativity, a lack of creating chances. And how much so that is now, whoa, hold on a second. Let's look at this a little bit deeper. So let's just look at the Premier League and what is happening in the Premier League in that same metric. So in the Premier League this season, only 20 players had created 30 or more chances from open play by the 30th game of the season, according to Opta. Last season, at the same stage, double that had done it by the same stage, twice the amount of players, and 37 the previous season. So you're looking at 20 players this season. Season before, 40 players. Season before that, 37. All right, is that an isolated number or is it a trend? We don't know.
Yeah.
But then when we look at, all right, let's increase the bar. 40 open play chances. Only 6 players in the Premier League have created 40 or more open play chances this season, compared with 15 at the same stage last season, 12 the season before. And then, final one, players who've created 50 or more chances from open play. We've got one player. One player in the Premier League has achieved that stat this year, which is Bruno Fernandes. Last year, at the same stage, we had 4 players, and the season before that, 6. So that points to less creativity in the Premier League this season.
Yeah.
Right. So we had Paul Brand on, didn't we? And he was talking about trends and changes in the Premier League this season, teams becoming more direct, which we've spoken about.
Yeah.
A greater reliance on set pieces.
Yeah.
Long throws, etc., etc. So I just wonder this, and this is just off the top of my head, is this a possible consequence of, we're looking for reasons. The whole point of this episode of the podcast is, why did 4 Premier League teams get knocked out in the last 16? And there's lots of things we've spoken about there. So is it a possible consequence? Defenders in the Premier League are no longer coming up against creativity every week, week in, week out in the Premier League. They're no longer coming against it. They're coming up against set plays and direct play. So when they come up against these more creative players who are creating more goal-scoring opportunities from open play, are they struggling because they're not prepared to play against them? Do they find it difficult? I don't know. It's a possible consequence. But
it's interesting as well. The one player you talk about there is Bruno Fernandes.
Yeah.
And the stats he's hitting. Let's not forget, Manchester United didn't qualify for the Champions League.
Yes.
And they've also got the added bonus of having the breaks every week.
Yes.
Which is huge. And he does look fit and strong, Bruno Fernandes. Every time I watch him, I think, he looks like he's going to affect a game.
Yeah,
there's obviously another, like you say, different style of play and things like that. I think since Michael Carrick's come in, I think he's changed the way that they play, and they're actually enjoyable to watch again, Manchester United. But there's obviously that definitely helps as well.
Yeah, and he is definitely a player, and I think Manchester United are a team who have benefited from having that opportunity to rest in season, which other teams haven't had. It hasn't benefited the balance sheet probably,
No.
but that it's put them in a stronger position. So, look, what does this mean for me? I've lived all over the world, and everywhere you go into a bar, there's a Premier League game on.
Yeah.
You know, the Premier League is genuinely watched all over the world, and it's watched because it's the most exciting football league in the world. If these metrics are a one-off, then fine. But if they point to a wider trend, and the game is becoming less exciting, it's becoming we don't have those wonderful creative players that were in the Premier League up until very recently. The managers are electing to play a different way. The Premier League is a business,
Yeah,
and the products of that business is the game. So they've got to produce games that people want to watch. Otherwise, people will stop watching them.
Yeah.
So, if people stop watching them, then the money's not going to be coming into the Premier League in the way it has done over the last 20 odd years. So, should the Premier League follow the example of League Earn and provide more opportunities to rest within the schedule? It's a difficult question.
It is difficult. The other thing I'd just touch on very quickly is when we were talking before about the amount of games. Don't forget, you were talking about teams from England making the final. Well, over this year and last year, it's a new format in the Champions League, which is more games again, which is also difficult. The league format you get rewarded for finishing higher. There's more money in it. So teams are going to play their better players to try and get more money in the coffers as well, to make sure that they've got more for the clubs. So that's an interesting thing. Also, as well, when you talk about the product of the Premier League and the Champions League, I don't know whether you noticed in the games. So let's talk about Arsenal set pieces, for example. I watched the games against Bayer Leverkusen. They were ringing the goalkeeper, getting in and around him on set pieces. The referees were having none of it.
Yeah.
It's almost like they've been given a narrative as to say, you are not ruining our product by just scoring off set pieces and causing problems off set pieces. And I think that's what the Premier League need to do as well. I know we're going off piste a little bit here,
No,
but
we're not.
I do think there's an element where if we want to get our game back to where it was, I think there's got to be get rid of VAR, because I think that has a problem as well with the game, but also how you referee the game in terms of set pieces and things like that. If you want to be more protective, stamp it out, get rid of it, and let our teams be creative again. Totally agree.
I think that's a great point. And I think that is a great point on which to finish.
I agree. Enjoyed that, mate. Thanks for thanks for discussing everything about it. As ever, this has been another episode of Strain on the Game. Follow us on social media and YouTube at Strain on the Game. Subscribe, like, and follow.